All right. Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. We had a little Wi-Fi implosion. But my name is Dawn Keotting, and I'm here to talk to you this evening through our live stream on Shohin Bonsai. Underhill Bonsai has asked me to do this in lieu of their Thursday night meetings that we can't do because of the social distancing that we must do. So we're going to go ahead and do it via this live stream, and I'm going to go through a PowerPoint with you to talk about Shohin and developing Shohin and give you some hints on their care. And then we'll go ahead and go over some of the trees, and especially the species, the Yaupon, that we're going to be doing the workshop with when all things return to as normal as they're going to be. Evan's here doing all the heavy lifting as far as technical, but Evan Pardue, the nursery manager, has a source for some nice Shohin Yaupon. This one's a little larger, but it's a nice specimen for being able to show you on video and on the stream. But we have some sources for some good single trunk Yaupon for you to be able to make your own Shohin or small bonsai with. And they're truly a tremendous species. They're very easy to deal with. They have very few pests, very few problems. They're good growers for most everybody. And they have a root system that's very amenable to getting into a small pot. So we'll go into that a little bit more after the PowerPoint, and then we'll open the floor to questions as far as I'll give you an idea showing you how I cut down some bonsai, and some of these specimens that I have behind me have been done that way, and how you can make maybe some of your trees that are okay bonsai into something much better if we just shorten them down and make a more substantial tree out of them, allowing the trunk to really be strong versus a small trunk on a tall tree is not always grabbing as far as bonsai goes. So the beginning will be the PowerPoint, and Evan will go ahead and start on that for me. Very good. So we have the Improving Your Bonsai Collection with Shohin. The next slide is basically just giving us some idea of what Shohin is. Shohin is the smallest of the bonsai. There are some mame that are a little bit smaller, but Shohin basically can be carried in one hand. Typically about 8 inches. Some people will say 7 3/4. There are no ruler police going around at these shows. If they are small trees that give the quality of a Shohin bonsai, people aren't running around with rulers measuring your trees. The mame, which a lot of people have heard of, they're just the smaller end of Shohin, where we're talking 5 or 6 inch trees. But when we talk about Shohin, basically it's under 8 inches. So the next slide just shows, the next few slides are going to show some of the trident maples, Japanese black pine, some of the power that you can get in a tree that's only 8 inches tall. Both of these, this trident and this Japanese black pine, are both 8 inches. In a semi-cascade like the black pine, it's measured from the apex to the tip, and you can see how powerful this tree is. You can imagine this as a full-grown, full-sized bonsai, say that maybe is a foot tall and 2 feet in diameter. This tree has everything that larger tree would have, but in this compact version of it. And you can see the ramification in the trident maple. Again, this is a nice tree, even though it's only 8 inches tall. Next slide, please. This is even a smaller, little 4-inch trident maple, where somebody displayed it with a small tea ceremony building that they had built just to show this little bitty trident maple. And with the tiny leaves that are on this trident, it's in scale for this situation. So that was just a real fun addition to a show I had gone to. This next slide shows us Shimpaku. Again, 10 inches, maybe it's a little tall, but look how powerful this little tree is. Next to it's a little Shimpaku that's 6 inches tall. Again, all the movement in the trunk, the dead wood, the movement of the whole composition of the tree. It's fantastic, and yet you can fit this in the palm of your hand and walk off with it. There's some advantages to that, as you'll see a little bit later. This final single tree is a little Zelkova. Beautiful, it gives us the idea of a young tree in a pasture or a grassy space that doesn't have other trees around it, that's growing into this broom style. And again, the trunk is just pencil sized. You see the whole pot fits into the hand. Yet this tree is ramified, there is structure, there is branch architecture that goes all the way out to the twigs, and you get the feeling this is a full-scale tree, just in miniature. This is just a few of the slides from the National Bonsai exhibit, both in 2016 and 2018, just to give you an idea of some of the trees that were available to be seen. These trees are all in that 7 inches and under, and all different species. Black pine at the top. Down at the lower right is a Zelkova broom style that is just an unbelievable, if there's not 200 branches on this little bitty tree, and it's 7 inches tall. The stand is a classic stand, a classic box stand that we put these trees on, because Shohin is individual trees aren't going to attract as much attention as a larger bonsai at a show, so they show them in groups like this. So there'll be a few slides of some of the different Shohin compositions that were at the different nationals over the last couple of trips. This one shows two stands that are a little bit more unusual. The one on the left is still very Japanese in nature, but the stand on the right much more what we'd call modern, much more as far as probably owner-made, and sets the trees off in a real unusual fashion. Shohin being the little gems of bonsai, a lot of people take their stands and do a little bit something different with them, and we will see some of these stands in wood, some of them are metal, some of them actually are lucite, and people are having a lot of fun with showing their miniature bonsai at these shows. Here's another couple of interesting stands, a more classic one on the left, and then another stand on the right that's got a more modern feel to it and is showing the trees off a little differently. These are a lot of fun to see, and one of the reasons of going up to the National Bonsai exhibit, it's in Rochester, New York, every other year. It's supposed to be this year in September, but so far, as far as I know, it's still ongoing, but of course, with COVID and the coronavirus, we'll have to see if it gets postponed or canceled. But one of the fun things about going up to the National Bonsai exhibit, the U.S. Nationals in Rochester, is seeing over 300 trees, and there were probably in the realm of 30 to 40 of these Shohin compositions. So all different species, notice all different pots, all different styles of trees. The Shohin can do everything a big tree can do, just in a smaller package. This is one more with a more classic on the left, a little bit more modern take on the Shohin bonsai rack on the right. And again, all of these trees are just, if you look at that tree that Evan's pointing at on the right-hand side, that tree is every bit as wonderful as a full-scale, two-person, 2 foot tall, 3 foot wide specimen. It's got all the detail, all the design aesthetics. It's just in a package that you can carry with one hand, which as I get older, I appreciate. And these are the last couple of shots. And look at the movement, especially the tree on the left. What really sets that one up to be a fantastic tree is that trunk movement that starts very, very close to ground level. You've only got 6 to 8 inches to play with. You need to get a lot of tree in that 6 to 8 inches. And if it doesn't move until 3 or 4 inches up the trunk, you've kind of run out of room to develop your tree. So that tree really shows the importance of getting some of your design and your movement in the tree in the earliest stages as it comes out of the pot. This is my Shohin display that was at Nationals in 2018. It was all tropicals. And it was something that I was real pleased to be able to bring. The top tree, which I have here today, is a narrow-leaf ficus. Therein follows a Fukian tea, thankfully blooming pink pixie bougainvillea, I had a ficus and then a Brazilian rain tree, Bahama black olive, sorry, on the bottom right. And then an S. Cambron as an accessory tree. So it was one of the few that I've seen at Nationals that was all tropicals. Some people will have a mixed display, but I was able to pull together all 6 trees as being tropicals and go up there for that. So that was fun. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of Shohin? Well, disadvantages, basically, I say it ain't so. I don't like to say that there are disadvantages to it, but you have to be realistic. One of the problems is we have them in very small pots. They're small trees, and to look good, they can't be in oversized pots. So there can be watering and soil issues. There's less room for error on watering and on having fertilizer and good soil. It requires things like good drainage. We need to have a small enough soil composition, soil-wise, for the roots to not be exposed to too much air, yet at the same time, as we get a smaller soil size, we will actually start holding too much water and we'll end up having root rot in a shallow pot because we're not getting the right drainage. So you really have to find that happy medium of a small-ish grained soil, but it still has to drain very rapidly. Because it drains very rapidly, we have to water more often. But so the requirements with a larger tree, we still want rapidly draining soil. We're still going to have that water balance, but because a larger tree is in a larger pot, we have more room for error. We can be late an hour on watering. With Shohin, we sometimes can't. So there is some problems with watering and drainage and soil when you go into Shohin that you'll have to kind of work your way through. Your soil mix, of course, is going to be dependent on your species. Obviously, the conifers and things like junipers and pines are going to take less organic matter, less water holding capability. Your tropicals and your deciduous are going to need more water holding capability. But again, it still needs to drain. So there'll be some changes that you'll have to work through if you start doing more and more Shohin. The other thing is, your watering schedule. Most of us water our bonsai once a day, if it's not raining or things like that. Some Shohin in the heat of the summer may need to be dealt with differently so that we don't have them dry out on us, and of course that would be bad. As far as some of the other disadvantages, when we have automatic sprinklers, that is something that can help. I typically will put automatic sprinkler up so that at just around lunchtime it'll go off and it'll cool the whole area, and that helps my Shohin. Some people will sink the Shohin into a box of sand or some sort of medium like a small grained lava rock, anything like that. Even pine bark can be used. And if those pots are sunk up to the lip of the pot in that medium, 2 things can happen. 1, the pot's not in the sun and not getting hot. And 2, the roots can go through the bottom of the pot into that medium, and it can help the tree make it through the summer without you having to be there watering it 3 times a day. Because I don't know about you, but I don't have an apprentice. So when it comes to cold, the same thing can happen. We can put them into our in our greenhouses. We don't really want to greenhouse them like a tropical and keep them warm, but we can keep them from absolute frigid cold because a small pot can ice solid pretty rapidly. But for the most part, in our neck of the woods, that's not the biggest problem. But again, sinking them in some sort of medium like a mulch, like a pine bark, that'll prevent the pot from freezing through too rapidly if we do get some super cold weather. But the nice thing about Shohin is they're small enough that you can either bring them inside or into a cool greenhouse, into your garage, someplace where they're not going to be hot, but they won't freeze through if we do get some excessively cold weather, especially north of the lake. It doesn't happen too much here in Thibodeau. So some of the disadvantages too, some people would say design. That smaller trees are harder to design. I don't think they're harder to design, but you just need to complete your vision pretty quickly. 2 or 3 branches and a crown and you're done. So you have to say what you're going to say, and then you don't have a whole lot of tree to say it with. So that helps with keeping the first curves low down in the trunk. keeping your branches in proper taper and proper size with your tree, giving it the look of a miniature tree. You have to use all the same design principles as your large bonsai, but you just need to distill it down to the absolute minimum so that you can get everything said in 6 to 8 inches. So I think there are a ton of advantages, lots and lots of advantages. The biggest one is that sometimes our so-so trees can become much better trees. And I'll have some examples of this after we get through with the PowerPoint, where I'm taking a tree that just doesn't have a lot of promise as it was, or the promise was 10 years from now, and I'm going to turn it into something that is going to be more promising in a 2 to 3 year period. So if we take, say, a tree that is more of a telephone pole, it's maybe a 1-inch base and it's 12 inches tall. It may not have a lot of taper. Maybe it doesn't have a lot of movement. There may be a whole lot of things wrong with this tree that, the species may have enamored you when you bought it. You may have, enjoyed it for a while. But now you're starting to think, is there more to my trees? Is there something better I can do with this tree? And one thing about taking a taller tree and making it into a smaller tree is that the shorter the tree is, the trunk's going to look more powerful. It's going to look larger and more powerful. It's going to improve the taper, because if you've got an inch wide trunk and you taper that tree up to a 6 or 8 inch finish, there's going to be a quicker taper there than in a really tall, leggy tree. So it's going to give you that power of and realism that the taper provides us. Tapering from the base of the tree up to the apex of the tree is what gives us a bonsai that looks like a real tree. One of the things too is rapid development. I mean, we can grow branches. These are small branches we're growing. They don't have to get an inch thick like on a big 2-foot tall trident maple to be a significant branch. My number 1 branch may be a 1/4 inch thick. I can grow that in a season, 2 at the most, and start ramifying on that. So in 2, 3, 4 years, you can take a fairly stripped down trunk, if you're talking a tropical or a deciduous, and turn it into a decent little Shohin instead of the 10 or 15 year project it might be if you have a bigger tree. One of the other things that I really love too is space. It's so much easier to diversify your collection when nothing's taking up 3 feet on your bench. You can put Shohin underneath your larger trees and use the same bench space, but yet have 3 trees on it instead of 1. You can, if you like to have a variety of species, well, if you have one of everything and they're all 3 feet tall, you're going to run out of bench space really fast. But with Shohin, and you can stagger them on your bench, you can put 20 trees in a 6 or 8 foot area pretty easily. One of the things is just getting ready for storms. Enough said as I have there. If you need to put trees down below benches to protect them, if you need to move them into a structure, anything else like that, isn't it a lot easier to grab 1 tree in each hand than have 3 people grabbing 1 tree to move it? Quick but teensy wiring, it can be hard wiring, but there's not that much to wire. So if you get a little proficient with wiring and using a hemostat or a small plier, you can wire your Shohin just like, or if you have teensy fingers, wire your Shohin just like your other trees. But it's not going to take a whole day to wire a ramified tree. If it's a Shohin, it's going to take an hour. So that's a really nice thing. And then, just saving your back. Like I said, size-wise, it's so nice to be able to pick up a tree and move it inside and work on it. If I want to work on it while I'm watching TV, I can do that, and I can do that without having to get my husband to move it for me. So lots of advantages I find, and not the least bit is you can turn some of your maybe less exciting trees into a small tree that may be quite exciting. Just the size alone takes people's breath away. So it's a lot of fun to have very small trees in your collection. So just a few slides just to show you the one-handed versions versus the really big versions. I've got 2 Chinese elms, a broom style on the left and a little bit more natural broom style on the right, and kind of their mini-me's, 1 in each hand. It's a lot easier for me to pick up those 2 trees than it is to pick up those big guys. And we won't even talk about wiring. Same thing on that black pine. That black pine, yeah, I can put it on my hip and move it around, but it's a big tree. The little black pine in my hand, obviously a lot easier to deal with and took a lot less time to wire. Same thing with the Japanese maple forests on the other side. One hand or, 3 hands. And these are slightly larger, but they give you the same idea. I've got a boxwood that's a little hard to carry, and then one that's not hard to carry at all, the little 2-hander. Same thing with the trident maple. I jokingly call the big trident maple in the light blue pot Trizilla. And it's a 2-person tree to pick up, whereas the other one I can handle by myself. It's a Shohin size. It's a little bit larger than Shohin, but that size tree is very, very nice to have around and gives me just as much pleasure. It turns just as pretty in the fall. It does all the same things as my big tree does. It's just easier.
Talk about the Shohin size requirement really quick, since you just noted.
Yeah, Shohin is just the next size up. I believe like about 14 inches down to the 8 inches of Shohin. A lot of them are in that 11 to 13 inch size is kind of commonly considered. So there wasn't a real name for it for a long time. But what has happened, because they would go to just one hand, one man, where you could carry it with 2 hands. But what happened over time, Shohin is a rather, considering bonsai as centuries in the making as far as a hobby, the Shohin bonsai are actually a fairly new port of that. I mean, they've been doing it since the 50s and 60s, but it really has taken off in the 70s and 80s and has great enjoyment and large followings now. But now that people have been doing it a long enough period of time, some of these trees just eventually kind of outgrow the 8 inches. And so the Shohin is that next size that they kind of end up in when they outgrow themselves if you can't keep them tiny anymore. So the mainstays of all good bonsai design are in the design of Shohin. You still need taper and you need proportion. That thick to thin, long to short, big to small. As we're saying, everything needs to be tapering from the bottom to the top of the tree. The first branch is larger and is set further away from the second branch than the second branch is from the third branch. We have each branch tapers like a tree. It's thicker next to the trunk and it gets thinner out to the twigs. So as we continue to make arrangements and adjustments to make that happen, that's what gives our trees the believable nature. We'll find is these trees are going to grow. They're full-size trees. They're going to try to put up big branches. They're going to try to do things that we don't want them to do. And we have to, every 2 or 3 years, have to be watching for bigger branches forming, bigger shoots coming out, losing taper, and doing what we can to adjust for that to keep them in that size realm. You have to stay on it a little bit more often than you do your larger trees. So with the internode thing, in the spring, all of our shoots come out from the last bud. And the first couple of internode spaces, the spaces between one leaf set and another leaf set, are typically very close together the first couple of leaf pairs that comes out. And then as that shoot elongates, it starts growing faster and longer, and the internode spaces get longer and longer. And so what we tend to do is we allow these branches to grow until the girth of the branch, the thickness is what we need, and it hardens off, it gets mature enough, and then we come back and we cut to those short internode spaces so that the next branch comes off pretty close to where that one did. And we continue this through a period of time to get ramification in a very short distance. We need to get several branches in a 2 or 3 inch distance versus in a large tree we have a lot more space to deal with. So these small internodes is especially important in Shohin, and that's why we tend to both pick for it and try to adjust for it by where we trim, but we also get small internode and small leaf species because it just makes it a little bit easier on us. So we love the the Chinese elm because it's got short internodes. Some of the tiny leafed Japanese maples like the Keotting have very, very tiny leaves, but they also have very, very tiny internodes. So that helps us in our process. It can be done with the longer, more regular species like an American hornbeam, but we have to keep cutting back to those short internodes and not try to use sections of long internode, because over time no new buds are going to sprout from that, and we're going to have a piece of branch that doesn't have any twigs on it. So, so that's the way that we do that, is we keep cutting back to these short internodes. So this is just a little hand-drawn picture showing you the difference. If we can keep a branch that has short internodes, then we can keep our twigging much closer to the tree, whereas the longer our internodes are, then we end up with twigging that is practically out of the visual field of our little picture. So, we're going to make a Shohin. So how do we do that? Well, picking your stock, to me, is the most important thing to learn. Learn to look for good rootage of the nabari, and some sort of widening at the trunk at the soil level, or dig down a little bit and see if you've got some of this widening and a little bit of nabari going on before you pick a piece of stock to work with. Also, you want interest in movement near that soil surface. You want some sort of a bend to happen pretty quickly, because again, the rest of the tree has to happen on top of that. So look for well-placed lower branches. Find a branch that can then be moved into the top. And if you've got, say, with this little tree, it's got a right branch, it's got a left branch. The rest of the tree, this was a 3-gallon Chickasaw crepe myrtle. It was about 3 feet tall. What you're seeing there is about 7 inches tall. It had a bottom branch, it had a left branch, it had a right branch, and then it had a branch coming towards me that I could actually then bend up and turn into an apex. So the rest of the tree was chopped away, and this tree has looked like this almost since I took it out of the nursery pot. It had a finished look to it from the get-go, because it's a small leaf variety with small internodes. It had a couple of well-placed branches and a third branch that could be the top. And then poof, you have this interesting, cute little tree. And I have it here tonight to show you where it's at now.
Did you want to go ahead and show that tree?
Yeah, we can do it later.
Okay.
Let's just be easier.
This
tree too, this is a larger tree, but it gives you that a little bit better ability to see. It was built on the same premise. This was about a 3.5 foot tall Japanese black pine from Brussels Bonsai Nursery. The bottom had some nice informal upright movement to it, but then, like a lot of trees that are in a nursery situation, they weren't trimming it anymore, and then another section came up that was with an internode spacer between the whorls, almost a foot long, and then had 5 branches on it, and then another foot long and had 5 branches on it. So the top 2 feet of this tree, or almost 2.5 feet of this tree, was really not usable as far as a bonsai tree. Or if I was going to grow that into something, it would take me literally years. But what this tree did have was a well-placed first branch, a well-placed second branch, and then a third branch that I was able to pull up and wire it to the stub. Once it maintained its position, I was able to remove the stub. And I have that tree in my collection, and it's continued to ramify and to develop very well. But as you can see in the slide or the picture on the right-hand side, the stub is there beneath my fingers holding the branch away. And I don't know if you can use your pointer to show that, that area, but this branch is literally, it was just another branch. It was a horizontal branch, but the pine with about a 1/2 inch thick branch can easily be moved, and we pulled it up, tied it to that stub to give it that vertical position to make the top. And so there you end up with that little tree in the left-hand side with the left branch, right branch, right branch, left branch, number 1, number 2, and a new top. And since then, continuing to allow some of these branches to grow and develop, it has a full canopy now and is a nice little tree. But it looked pretty darn good from the get-go because there was a branch to be able to use for the apex. So this is just going to be a little slide thing to show how to grow one if you need to cut a tree off completely from a stub. What I like to start with is a well-rooted, either deciduous or tropical plant. Obviously, you can't cut back a juniper or a pine to no green. If there is no green or no buds, then you have no tree. So this technique really only works with deciduous or tropical, or like a broadleaf evergreen, like an azalea or the Yaupon. You just can't use it in like a pine or a juniper. So what we do is we cut off approximately to a half to 2/3 of the anticipated height. So if you have a trunk that's about 1 inch tall, cutting it back to 2 to 3 inches is a good place to start. Then we go ahead and let it sprout. You seal the wound, protect that wound so that things will sprout equidistantly all the way around. You may have a front that you prefer. You may have an area where you think this is how I want to design my tree. And a lot of people will tell you to go ahead and make a diagonal cut to start making taper from that first cut. But what I find, and I'll show you in one of the next pictures, is that you end up with a tree area on that tree that's not amenable to buds busting. It dries out too much. There's not, it's thin where you come up to that point, and I'll show you in a minute. But it's best to get the flat cut, seal it very well, and then let those the trees sprout all the way around that cut, and it gives you maybe 8 to 10 different sprouts that you can then pick for your apex. And you'll probably get one where you want it, versus if we do it the other way around, you may have to cut back and make a shorter tree. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is a narrow-leaf ficus, and this was done in that same way. It was originally, it's in a 6-inch pot. It was flat cut. You have trouble seeing the flat cut there, but it's a flat cut there. And it is put up a bunch of shoots all the way around the tree. So that now I can look for the strongest shoots and the best shoots for a #1 branch, and where they fall with maybe the best nabari on this plant. And so we ended up saving not only an apex, but we saved the first branch to the right, the second branch coming off near the apex, and a back branch coming off of that apex branch. And then we did that diagonal cut between the apex and the first branch. Now we know where to put that cut, so now it's time to put it in. So this is that tree as it developed. This is 3 years later in a nice little Sarah Rayner pot, and now it can almost not fit in that pot. The base has gotten so big. So the next shot is of that tree. In 7 years, it continues to develop. It continues to get a base on it, still cramming it into that little pot. And the branches are getting more and more ramified. We're getting a better architecture to our tree. And then just without the leaves, I go ahead when I'm working on them, wiring them, things like that, I go ahead and defoliate. So that's fine. Yeah. So that's just at year 10. And you can see the base is thickening, thickening, thickening. The lovely thing about tropicals is they will continue to develop in those small pots. So then this is just another project tree. And it was a narrow-leaf ficus cutting, waste not, want not. I pulled that one out of the ground, and I noticed it had some nice taper and some good roots all the way around, which is something that we want to see. So we had thickening down at that base where the nabari was starting to develop. There's even a little bit of movement there. There were some roots up there, but I decided to go with the lower roots. So I ended up removing those roots and using that little bit of movement that's in it. And so at the next slide, that's what I ended up deciding to work with. I've cut it off, flat cut at the top. It was going to sprout all over the darn place. And then I was going to be able to pick the best of those sprouts to decide what's going to be my apex, what's going to be the other branches on this tree, and then make that diagonal cut for the taper, knowing where my sprouts are. So the other thing is, do we have enough root mass? In a cutting like that, because it's a tropical, I could probably put it in a small bonsai pot. But one of the things I suggest is, until you have a really good pad of roots, go ahead and grow it out in a bulb container, a shallow azalea pot that's in terracotta, anything that's got a little bit of depth so that you can stabilize the tree well, give it plenty of soil to grow some roots, and go ahead and let it get a workable pad of roots underneath it before you put it in a bonsai pot. If we put it in too early, it's hard to tie in, and if you can't get them absolutely stable in a pot, they're not going to do well post repot. Any kind of movement hurts the little hair roots that grow and can be enough to kill a tree if the wind or your cat or anything else rocks them around. If there's not enough roots there to nourish that tree to grow as well as you want it to grow, you're still trying to develop it at this stage. So now's not really the time to put it into a bonsai pot. Like the previous slide showed, that little tree stayed in a little a 6-inch grow pot for a little while until I had enough root base to put in that Serrarina pot. Not enough roots to absorb water sometimes, and then if there's no extra roots, if some of these roots get dry because we were home late, we didn't, it was an excessively hot day, something happened, the cat knocked it off the bench into the sunlight. If we only have this one shallow layer of roots, then what's going to happen is we lose that layer, we're going to lose that tree. So a deeper pot while you develop a nice pad of roots is a good thing. Then we can tie it into a bonsai pot better. This is obviously a larger tree, or maybe not obviously because I don't have a beer can next to it, but this is a much larger tree, but it shows you the kind of root mass that you want when you're putting it in a bonsai pot. I really think it's important to have that kind of rootage for a tree to grow well in that small pot. Not saying that it can't be done, but I would argue that your tree is going to grow faster and develop faster in a slightly larger pot, in a little grow nursery pot, in a bulb pan, in a colander. There's so many different things you can use. But get a good root mass. And then when you cut it flat, you can see that tree is sitting on a table. It's stable without being in a pot. It's perfectly fine. So what I typically do with those smaller trees is put them deep into a nursery container, punch a few holes in the side of the nursery container, and just run wire from the nursery container, make one loop around the trunk and then back to the nursery container, and do that 3, 4, 5 times. And not tight enough to scar the trunk or anything, but just to hold it in that nursery container so that it can develop a good root mass. And then in a year or two, it's really ready to go in that bonsai pot. And this is that same tree, and you can see, that's a 4-inch trunk, so I've got maybe a 2-inch thick root mass there, and I could go thinner if I needed to. But that's the kind of root mass you want to be working on when you're putting trees in bonsai pots. The more roots, the better. So pruning tips. We want to think of the future design and then ramify to that silhouette. We don't want to trim at the silhouette. So, and that's especially important when we start looking at Yaupon and how we're going to deal with them in our workshop. When they first sprout back out, you can imagine that tree trunk there just had a whole bunch of sprouts. If we kind of give it a haircut to the silhouette that we're looking for, then the next bunch of branches is going to start growing from that cut spot. And we're going to have these long, lanky branches with no interior buds, no interior branching, and then all of our leafy stuff's going to be way out on the edges. And that's not a realistic look. It's more of a lollipop look. So what we want to do, and this is what I'm talking about, if we prune a tree at the silhouette, then we get all of our ramification out at the long, lanky limbs of the, because most of our trees, when we cut them, when we prune them, they're going to throw the strongest sprouts right there at the cut. They're not going to throw a lot of them further back, any at all sometimes. So if we make that cut too far away from the trunk, then we end up with foliage and leaf mass and twig mass that's way too far to the ends. And again, we're looking at a tiny tree here. So we need to push that closer to the trunk. So the way we do that is we prune to grow towards that silhouette. So it's hard to do at first. This is the hardest part of any Shohin workshop, is making those cuts right there, starting well shy of your goal, about a half to 2/3 away from where you want that leaf mass to eventually end up. This next slide shows, okay, after a year's growth, or at least one growth cycle, we can get 2 to 3 here in Louisiana when we're lucky, 2 in the spring and 1 more in the fall. But then you start getting that growth and taper, and you're starting to get towards your silhouette. The one on the left is that first growth cycle, the one on the right's adding another growth cycle. When we go to the next slide, we actually are now going to finally be reaching our silhouette. And now we've got ramification, we've got interior branches. We have a tree that looks more like a real mature tree than one that's got these really lanky branches and a lot of stuff going on at the very tips. So this is what you need to kind of think of when you're pruning your Shohin, is to prune back a little shorter than you really want to, because the next round of growth is going to get you back to your silhouette. And yet it's going to have more ramification, more twigs. So again, when we're talking cutting back to the 2 leaves as soon as the branch extends to 6 to 8 leaves, that's typical bonsai stuff. But again, in the Shohin, the reason why that's especially important to go back to the very first 2 leaves is because that's going to be the shortest internode and give you the shortest, quickest twigging. So the exception would be if you needed the branch to be thicker, say it's your number 1 branch, and you need it to be the thickest branch. Well, then let it grow until it gets kind of close to that size, not quite, but close to it, and then bring it back. Yes, you're going to bring it back, even though it's a 6-inch branch and you really like it. Bring it back to that first internode and maybe the second one, and then grow the rest of the branch from there, with each branch that you grow being a little bit smaller than the previous, so that you get taper in your branches just like tapers in the tree. So, and for tertiary twigging, when you get a mature tree, and this would be a little red maple because I've got the little red leaves on it, that first 2 leaves will come out. The next 2 leaves, before they even open, you pinch them off, and that will give you the very tiny, tiny twigs that those trees are well known for. But you do that on a very mature tree, a tree that is otherwise built, and now you just need twigs. So this is that rangy growth. Sometimes we'll see a decent little branch, but all of a sudden, some little bud will get enough sunlight and enough fertilizer, and it'll throw up some big rangy piece of growth. You want to take that off, because that ruins that taper, and it ruins that appearance of a real mature tree. Also, what that'll do, it may fill in your silhouette faster, but if it's a deciduous tree and you lose your leaves, your tree in the wintertime is not going to be a believable, nice little tree. It's going to have all these big rangy branches in all the wrong places. So big rangy branches like that, take them out right away. This is just a little example, and I'll have Evan point to it, but this branch here, coming down, that's a rangy branch. This branch over here is also a rangy branch coming out this way. So in the second picture, both of those are removed. And you can see that just in general, looking at those 2 pictures, the one on the right is lighter, airier. It's allowing the finer branches to stand out. Your eye isn't brought to those big rangy branches that are there. So the energy distribution is important in all of our trees, and it has to do with our leaf size. So don't get too frustrated if you have a very small tree that has larger leaves on it, because until you get it more ramified, those leaves are going to be larger. The fewer the branches, the fewer the leaves, the larger the leaf has to be to provide that tree with energy. As we ramify and we get more twigs, we have more leaves and a bigger actually leaf mass, and so each leaf can be smaller, so the tree still gets its needs made. So the more we ramify, the smaller the leaves, the more twigs we have, the more leaves we have, and that gives us those believable small leaves. So the take-home message is we have to let the tree grow, but then we prune. We let it grow, we prune it back, we get 2 branches where there was 1. We let it grow again, we prune those, we get 2 branches where there was 1, which is now 4 branches where there was 1. We do it again, we get 8 branches, 16 branches where there was 1. So as we continue to prune and let grow, prune and let grow, our tree is going to eventually get to that shape that we want it, and it's going to get to that shape looking like a real tree. So again, this is just it's not the same little tree, but it was built the same way. It was a flat cut, a lot of branches grew, branches were picked, decided to go with a semi-cascade on that one, and in 3 years, that is what a tropical or a fast-growing deciduous tree can do in 3 years. If we let it grow and then we cut back, and let it grow and then we cut back. So the biggest mistake we make is keeping them trimmed pretty. We need to feed them, let them grow, let them get hairy. If we don't let them grow, we don't have anything to design with. If we don't let them grow, the tree will cycle into an unhealthy state. If we keep growing every little growing tip, if we keep cutting every little growing tip on it, the tree will cycle down in an unhealthy state, and it may be difficult to bring it back. They have to grow. So try not to keep your little trees in show shape all the time. It's a good reason to have a lot of trees. If you have a lot of trees, you don't have time to keep them all in show shape at one time. I say to my husband that it's a good idea that I have so many trees. But it's going to go through hairy and thin cycles, so that's normal. And if you need something to get girth, let it grow until it gets that girth and then trim it back. So in restyling, and that happens in Shohin more frequently than it does in the larger bonsai, because they'll kind of outgrow their silhouette or outgrow the size range. And if we have tropicals, basically, again, anything but a pine or a juniper, if we have tropicals, deciduous, or the broadleaf evergreens, then if they will bud back off of a pruning cut, then you can always come back, shorten it, shorten the top, regrow the top, excuse me, and get a tree back into shape. And periodically, you may have to take the top off of the apex or the crown off of a Shohin and regrow it to keep it in the right size range. Most of our trees are top dominant, and so we'll get branches that just eventually, no matter what we do, they get too big, and we have to seek out the small branches, cut out the big branches, but eventually we may have to regrow. But again, with a Shohin, it's going to regrow in 2 or 3 years. You're not going to be looking at a 10-year process. When we're restyling or having to regrow a branch or the top on a pine or a juniper, it's different. We have to have something to cut back to. We have to have another branch, and we have to plan for that. So anytime you get a back bud on a juniper or a pine, you want to nurture that interior bud. You want to get it light. You want to let it grow. You don't maybe want to candle prune it, or if you candle prune it, you allow the stronger candles to stay on it, taking away the weaker candles. You want to do anything you can to keep that interior growth healthy, because eventually, if your tree outgrows itself and you need to cut off that very large branch, you need to go ahead and have something to cut back to. Otherwise, all you can do is totally restyle it, or maybe allow it to become a larger bonsai. So again, it's just let it grow, let it grow, let it grow. I'm a big proponent of organic fertilizer because of how it keeps soil health going. The microbiome in the soil is very important to how well your trees grow. And so, or especially if I'm trying to develop a tree with ramifications, small leaves, things like that, the organics really do a good job. And then, you know, good sunlight. Obviously, in our neck of the woods, I put up shade cloths in the summertime. I may put them under a larger tree to get some shade, but they need to have, I keep them in full sun as long as I can. So probably 9 months out of the year, maybe 8 now. It's getting so excessive in the summer. I have them in full sun, but once the summer comes, I do give them some protection, because we will get some burn of the leaves and things like that with our summers being so hot. But strong growth gives us the shoots, and we need to grow our trunks, to heal those wounds. More growth gives us more branches and more design options. And more growth will give us fuller pads. We don't want those flat little pancake pads. We want some clouds. We want some three-dimensionality. So you need more twigs and more branches, and so you need more growth to produce that. So the health of these trees, it's pretty much the same as full-size trees, but there's just less tree to fight. So your standard pest control applies. Use all the same stuff you're successful with on your bigger trees, but just don't let up, because if you lose a branch on a Shohin, it pretty much ruins the design. But you can recover from that pretty quickly. But the best thing is to go ahead and keep up with your pest control. Use 3-in-1s, use whatever you have to do to keep fungus and insects under control. But the good news is, in a Shohin, you can replace a branch a lot faster than you can in a large tree. Pots, yeah, I'm kind of a pot hoarder. I think there's a Pot Hoarders Anonymous that I'm a charter member of. But one thing about Shohin is that because they're the little gems of the bonsai world, they tend to be shown in pots that are a lot showier and a lot different than the pots that the big trees may be in. And when you show in a group, what you want is not only, say if there's 5 trees, 5 different species, but you want 5 different styles of trees, and you want all of those pots to be 5 different pots. So if you have a light blue glaze on one, you want an unglazed pot on another, maybe a red unglazed and a gray unglazed, then maybe a shiny glazed pot versus a matte glazed pot. And different colors. You don't want 3 blue pots. So you need to have a lot of pots, and if you have a fair number of pots when you're showing, you can actually just pop a tree out of one pot and slip it into another without having to do a whole repot. Just, if it's a similar size and shape but just a different color. So it's just another excuse to go pot shopping, which I love. So basically, that's just what we've talked about is trying to get a lot of differences going in your Shohin. So when we do show them, you want different leaf color, different colors of green. If you can get a dark green and a light green and a reddish green or a red maple, if you have a flowering or berry forming bonsai, if all different types of greenery, all different types of styles. You don't want all informal uprights. You'll want a formal upright, a cascade, a semi-cascade, a clump, a group of some sort. And the same thing with pots, the same thing with the stands. Everything should be different on a Shohin display. And that's why a lot of people don't put together a single Shohin display themselves. They get together with their Shohin friends. And that way you have more trees, more pots, more stands, and you can make a better showing as a group. And Nationals does allow that. Sometimes every tree on a stand belongs to a different person. So here's some of the ways to display Shohin. A smaller rack with an accessory plant and 2 trees and then an accessory tree. They've got a nice little scroll in the back. It's just, and they're not lined up. The front, the single tree on the left is in front of the stand that has the 2 trees, so that you get a 3-dimensionality. And the tree on the left, the accessory tree, its movement is towards the right, so it's bringing you to the other Shohin rack. The other Shohin rack is bringing you back to that accessory tree. So your eye moves through the whole entire composition that's put there. So again, the movement should take you around. It should flow from tree to tree. The elements of the display should be staggered, like we talked about in that one. And if you use a scroll or an accessory plant or bronze figure, all the elements should serve a purpose to produce harmony. A lot of times that harmony is a season. If it's a fall show, they'll use a horse because horses are slick and fat after a summer on grass, and fall is their time of most energy. So they'll use a little bronze horse, they'll use some fall weeds or fall grasses as an accessory plant, and then maybe use a maple that's changing color to show fall again. So trying to bring a whole harmony to your composition is important. One of the things, Shohin stands can be expensive, and I have a large box stand that I did buy from somebody who imports them, and but it took me a lot of years to save up my coin and do that. This little display of almost more mame-sized trees that I put together for a Louisiana show years ago, I ended up making those stands myself, and I'll show you those as well. But it's basically, I say 1/4 to 1/2 inch, but that's actually 5.5 inch oak board that I got at Lowe's. It's 3/8 of an inch thick, and then the dowels are 3/8 of an inch on each side. And the dowels are probably made of poplar. Again, they're just in a bin at Lowe's. And a friend of mine has one of those square hole drills. But if you don't have one, you can drill a round hole and then take a file to it and make it a square. And I didn't even glue mine together. I just stained it and stuck them. They fit tight enough that I stuck them together like that. And they worked fine. And so they're great for local shows. They're great for you enjoying your trees and being able to bring them to a club show or a local show or a state show, and not have the expense of some expensive stands. You can design them to exactly fit the size of your trees, which is what I did there. I knew exactly what trees I was going to show, so I knew exactly what size stands to build. And it really didn't take that long, and if I can do that, you know, pretty much all you people can. So these are, again, the last few Shohin displays of the last nationals. On the right-hand side, there's a carved root stand. Those are mostly carved, and they're not really natural roots anymore. But that single stand alone in some shops will be $500, $600, $700. They're amazing, but you know that's a lot. So you know if you've got carving skills, go for it. And so are you ready for some Shohin? We'll talk about some of the workshops that are going to be coming up, but that's a very nice little Zelkova broom style. More of a single apex broom style versus the multi-apex broom styles, but in a shallow little pot and looks every bit as good as a larger tree of the same design. But easier to carry around, and I tell you what, you'll get some interest in your garden when you have some trees that are that small. People just love the small ones.
So we can go into talking about how that stock Yaupon.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about the workshops. You want to show them what Yaupon looks like?
Absolutely. Move a couple of things over. But this is a Yaupon stock tree that you can get at pretty much any nursery. The problem with some stock trees, and the reason you'll have to really look, is that a lot of times when you get a nursery container this big, to get the look of a big Yaupon, what the nursery is going to do is plant 3 little 1-gallon plants inside this pot. And then, so when you go to look at it underneath, it's not a single trunk. So what you want to look for is a single trunked tree like this. And this is actually, it's a multi-trunk, but down at the base, it's absolutely all one plant. So when we get these trees that Evan's got a line on, we're going to be looking for these single trunks. They're about 1 inch across. This one being a multi-trunk is a little bit wider, but the main trunk is about 1 inch across, and then we've got these large branches. Now I've taken out some. A lot of these do have crazy numbers of branches coming out because they're looking at making just a big bush. But what we're going to try to do is make them into small trees. So what we're going for is from this tree, this is very similar to what Evan was able to get from this nursery, and he's made the original cut down in these guys. And can you see these good, Evan?
Yeah, come up a little bit. Yeah, right there.
These have interesting little trunks on them, lots of movement, decent little bases. They're going to make super little trees. And this is how much growth he's already gotten from just cutting them back this spring.
I cut it back to the nubs like you had shown before, and it was
right.
It was in a container, just like what she's got holding out front there. It wasn't a 3-gallon like that earlier this year in the spring.
They have, the nice thing about Yaupon is they have a very fibrous root system, a lot like an azalea. And so they don't have these really big, thick roots that you cut them back too close to the trunk and there's no hair roots left. They're almost all hair root. They'll make some nabari and some roots, but they make a lot of fine roots. So it's easy to cut them back and get them in these small pots. We may decide with your workshop trees to put them in small pots. We may go one size up so that you can grow them faster, but this just shows that you can take a tree from a pot like this and get it into a little small Shohin pot and in no time have all this growth. Now, the one thing about Yaupon that's a little different than some other trees is that they are slow to thicken if you're trying to cut them back. So you really have to, and we'll go over this in the workshop, but you really have to let these run and get some girth and then come back and cut them closer. The one thing you want to avoid is just kind of buzz cutting or hair cutting these guys so that the silhouette is nice, but when you look up in there, you don't see the architecture. And what I'm talking about, and I'll show you a little bit further along Yaupon, and this little guy here, is that working for everybody? Mm-hmm. If I tilt this up, you can see the branch structure in this tree. This branch structure is something that, it's been worked on for a while. I've had this tree for quite a while. But in a 2 or 3 year period, you can make those little trees that we're showing you get very close to this. And then it's a matter of maintaining, cutting out too big and leaving the small. But when we look at this tree from, this angle, there's a little oak tree, a little informal, upright oak tree. And there's a little bit of wiring done on it today and a little bit of trimming. But this little tree has been in this size pot for probably 6-7 years now and is perfectly healthy, doing really great. The thing we're talking about as far as, again, size-wise, this one's a little bit larger one. It's a little Shohin. But the same thing goes on here when I tilt this up. If you can see the branch ramification in here and how this tree's been built. It's not just long branches with green things on the end of it. There are lots and lots and lots of branches going up there. And in fact, I don't know if turning it this way shows anything any better, but when you look at these things from the top, and you can see my black shirt through there, there are branches in every direction, and then twigs coming off of those, and twigs coming off of those, and twigs coming off of those. The one thing that these Yaupons do is twig very nicely. So getting a tree like this, this obviously came from a little bit larger starter plant, but this is the kind of thing that you can get with a Yaupon from this same exact size. The tree I started this tree from was actually a 1-gallon Lowe's tree that was maybe finger big. So it was half the trunks of these that Evans got you. So you're going to be way ahead of my game than I was when I started with this little tree.
Can you explain the variety? Because those are shillings, and then the one you were just talking about that's bushy on the ground, that's a red berry variety. Right.
This one, the shillings, there's also another name which I have in the handout, so you guys will have to help me with that one. But anyway, that variety is all male. It was propagated as an all male variety, and it twigs and makes these tiny leaves. It does make a flower, but it does not make a berry. So none of these shillings will go ahead and make berries. They're basically grown for the oak tree look, or obviously you can do slant style, you can do informal upright, you can do a lot of different styles with them. You can do literati. But there are Yaupon that do make berries. This one that I have is actually some sort of it's a red berry, and let's see, we had a tag. Is this one the one with the tag on it? Must be, huh? Or was the other one? The other one. But there's one called Nana that makes a red berry. I did put down on the Yaupon handout that I gave you. There's a yellow berrying kind. So if you Google Yaupon with red berries or yellow berry Yaupons, there are some varieties that do have berries. This was the first one I came across in a nursery, and it's some sort of Yule, Christmas, something in the name of it. But it had red berries all over it. What I did see compared to the shillings that were next to it, you could tell a difference in the density of the tree. It wasn't as dense and as twiggy. The shillings that were in the same size pot kind of made one big lollipop of a bush. These were more open, although I've cut some out of this, but these, you could just tell there was a little bit different. So it's going to be interesting to play with. It does look like it twigs very nicely though, and these leaves can get small. So I'm very interested to play with this, and I'm definitely going to go back Shohin size with this and see if I can't have a dwarf Yaupon holly that actually has red berries as well. So this is going to be a new one to me, but there are Yaupon hollies with berries. You just have to look for them. You can also, Yaupon is a native plant, so the native Yaupons are around, and you may see them in the wintertime sporting red berries as you drive down the interstate. Only about 1 in 100 is a female that has berries, so If you don't mark it, you better dig it because then you'll lose it, because when the berries fall off, you can't tell the difference between the males and females. But the wild stock tends to be very, very straight telephone pole. If they're 2 inches at the bottom, they're 2 inches, 4 foot up. So they're really difficult to deal with as far as movement. And if you cut back a 2-inch Yaupon, it has a tendency to die back, and you're going to get either some hollow trunk or things like that you're going to have to deal with. You can deal with that, and that's okay, but just know that that tends to happen. So collected Yaupon are very difficult. They're difficult to get any bigger than 2 inches. When you cut back, they do tend to have a lot of dieback, and they tend not to have a lot of natural movement. So if you can find a smaller specimen, and especially one that can be wired and bent or has its own little bit of natural movement, then, you know, by all means, that may be a good one to collect. But they will all be males. About 99 out of 100 will be males, and then you'll get that occasional red-berried female tree. So they're best to, if you want the red berries, they're best to collect when they're berrying and you can see them.
When would you chop that tree down?
This tree really can be done at this time. It's growing, all these trees are growing really rapidly. This tree just got a haircut yesterday. This one just got a haircut today. I'll show you this one. That hasn't gotten its haircut. And you can see that, you know, it's growing very strongly. So this is a good time to do it. You can these things, because they're not deciduous, you're not going to have a time when there's like no leaves on them to cut them. But when they're growing vigorously, you can cut them back. Or when you start seeing a little bit of bud development on them, like they're just getting ready to kick in. So anytime in March, April, is a good time to start doing these guys. And you can literally do them almost, you know, any time during the growing season, and they'll sprout back really fast like this. But the thing to remember with the Yaupon is, instead of keeping these pinched in now, to let them grow, because you can see how tiny these branches are. They are just, you know, they are just, what, 2 millimeters maybe. These little guys need to get a little thicker, and so letting them grow is going to go ahead and produce that. Yeah, go right ahead.
If you can see, yeah, just how small those branches are right now.
And they'll tend to stay that small unless we let them grow. But now's a good time to do that. One of the things that I'm getting ready to do, and I might have done if we were going to be able to stay outside, but I won't do it inside. But and again, this one, just talking about the being able to cut off a tree, if you pick the right tree, to get an almost instant bonsai, is this was that little Chickasaw crepe myrtle that was in one of the pictures. It was in a teal pot earlier. This tree had one branch, two branch, a back branch. What it had was this here was actually a front branch. Back here, this area here was where the rest of the tree came off. And it was about 1 inch in diameter at this point. And that's what we cut off and pulled this branch up, and this tree basically has looked like this its entire life. It was kind of an instant bonsai, that's always nice. So if you can look, I mean, you know, we're always the crazy ones in the nurseries looking, and you know, you look at 100 trees, you're going to find those ones that you make 1 or 2 cuts, and they all of a sudden look pretty, you know, substantial. But this tree here is one where I'm talking about, you know, don't be afraid to take one of your ugly ducklings, and maybe it's not so ugly, but maybe you can make it better, and do something wild and crazy with it. This tree's had a lot of bad things happen to it, but it was a tree in a forest, and it didn't fit. It's a trident maple, but if you look at the type of leaf it has, it's very long, narrow center part of the trident. And none of the rest of the trees in the forest had that same leaf pattern. So I pulled it out because it didn't match. And I didn't know what to do with it. It was tall and skinny like a tree in a forest. So I kept thinking, well, I'm going to, you know, I'll cut it back. I'll do something with it. And I did cut it back. But then I got to looking at that base, and I got to thinking with the movement, maybe there's more to it that I could do. So I used these couple of tops and came through and did a thread graft to get this branch here. I've got this one was already here. It was actually a thread graft from before.
You can turn it.
And
Towards. Yeah.
there we go.
So
So this, yeah, okay, this branch here was already a thread graft. So this one's coming through and giving me this branch. This one was already there. It's not attached to anybody anymore. But this branch here is the thread graft from back here. It's making the big loop-de-loop coming here. I did the hole at an angle so that it's coming up because this is going to be my new apex. And if we get a chance to, I don't know how close we can get a chance to look at it, but there are some very tight internodes right in here. There's a tight one here. There's a little bit of room there, but then there's several really tight internodes here. So basically, this will come off here. This will be the new tree. So I've got this branch here, this branch here. I'm hoping that I'll get a back branch, or I may even be able to use the back of this graft because every now and then the bud will reverse for me. But what I'm going to end up doing is making that diagonal cut here, and this whole tree is going to be this tall. And I don't know if you can see it well enough with my black shirt in the background, but it's got some nice movement. It's starting to get some taper. It's obviously going to taper up into this. And I think it's going to be a fun tree to fool with. So instead of being kind of a so-so tree that I took out of a forest, and now what am I going to do with it because it's real tall and skinny and I don't know what to do with it. Now I've been developing this base and been developing some branches, and I think now I got a plan for it. It's been an ugly duckling for a long time in my garden. But I think when I cut that off, I'm going to be very pleased with what I've got left. And it's going to right at make the Shohin measurement. What else was I going to talk about? And just to let y'all see these stands real quick though, but these are the little stands that I built. And, you know, everything small enough, less than 5.5 inches. My large stand is probably 7 inches wide, I believe. So it's easy to get a 6-inch pot on it. But you can, you know, you can show these. I've shown them with 3 trees, 1 on the top, 2 on the sides. If I had an extra, the small stand to put this pine, the pine could be on the top. Then a deciduous tree maybe in this spot. If I had a, and I probably do. This is a little winged elm. You know, so you've got your pine, your winged elm deciduous, and then an evergreen broadleaf. And so you've got 3 different types of trees, 3 different color greens. You've got 3 different leaf varieties. So that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. Now, the thing that would be not so good is I've got an unglazed brown pot and an unglazed brown pot. So it'd be great if I could slip this out of this pot and put it into a little something else. Because it's an evergreen, a broadleaf evergreen, it could go into a glazed or an unglazed pot. So I could put it in a blue pot, or I could put it in a gray unglazed, or a red unglazed. So, but this little stand, if it, you know, I don't know what, if it costs $20 or $30 to make both the stands together, you could do something like that. And as you can see from the PowerPoint, a lot of people with a little bit of skill with a saw are making all kinds of stands, neat stands for their trees. And the nice thing about making it yourself is, you know, not only do you have something else to be proud of, but you can make it for just what you need. You can make it the right width, the right height, the right number of shelves, whatever. And then I just used little buttons on the bottom for feet. So it was just very simple. Got the smaller one too, so this could be a place to put that pine. If I wanted to show the pine, I would go this way with it, show my pine that way, and then maybe put an accessory plant here, or maybe a little mountain stone, something of that nature, and then that would be the whole display. But this together is going to be much more eye-catching to somebody than just putting this little tree on a table and saying, come see my tree. So that's where the stands come in handy.
We're getting close to the end here.
Sure.
We don't have any questions coming in, but there's a few that I feel like would be good
Okay.
to answer about Shohin in general.
Sure.
Could you just go through a list of trees that would be acceptable and make great Shohin, just as good starter trees, and also
Right.
kind of go up into a little bit more advanced species as if they want to experiment with different species?
Sure. I really love the Yaupon, and I think that's a great place for us all to start with this workshop. Is they are tough. They have very few issues as far as bugs and things. They don't like wet feet. They don't, they'll get mold or whatever. You need to open them up periodically. When I have a tree that's like this, I'm going to start losing interior branches if I leave this like this. I have to come in and open this up. I have to trim it and open it up and get some light in there, or I'm going to start losing some of the twigging. But in general, these trees are quite impervious to a lot of problems. They're really easy care. And like I said, they're super easy to get into a small pot without having to spend a lot of time developing a root ball. One of my other favorites is the tropicals, and using this as an example is the narrow leaf ficus. Again, these are hard to kill, and I shouldn't say it that way like we kill trees, but we do. And these are just really hard to kill. And this tree is starting to get oversized. Pedro Morales had suggested that I not air layer it off right here, but I could very easily. If I keep trying to keep the top down, I'm going to eventually get a pancake and it's going to look funny. So I'm going to probably this summer think about, instead of continuing, which I've rebuilt the top a couple of times now, but it's getting, and I don't know if you can see this if I put it this way, but I'm starting to lose taper trying to rebuild the top over and over again. So I think what I'm going to do is just air layer off the bottom and let the bottom, let my tree be here. It'll be within the right height and it'll just go in a smaller pot. But these salicifolia or narrow leaf ficus are really, really nice, and that's what I had showed several of in making bonsai, the Shohin bonsai, were the narrow leaf ficus. And this again, see if you can see this guy, but this is that little semi-cascade, and again, there's plenty of ramification up there. But I've had this tree for years. I've probably had this tree 15 years. And it's a joy to have because they're very easy. One of the other things I really think are great are all the different elms. This one being the winged elm, but the Chinese elms, this one's Hokkaido. It's almost tropical. It can be a little fussy. It's certainly very easy to break. It's got its problems, but again, it's kind of hard to not love that little tree. One of the other, any of the Chinese elms, this one is a corkbark elm that needs a haircut real bad, but Chinese elms are, again, other than maybe a little fungus, if you periodically spray them to keep them from getting yellow leaves, these are pretty tough. They're fast growers. If you break a branch, a new one will sprout right where you broke it. So that's one that I think is very amenable to starting with Shohin. But really, there's a lot of different ones. I mean, the pine can be used. This is just a different ficus. And again, all the ficuses, whether it's the narrow leaf or the Golden Gate, ficuses are quite amenable to this and are pretty easy care. I find things like even the boxwoods. This is one of those, it's not quite Kingsville, but it's one of those sports that's like Kingsville. But these guys are strong growers, don't have a lot of problems. They take off from cuttings. I keep, 2 or 3 pots of cuttings with these things, and if I lose my little bitty cascade because it's in a tiny pot and it got too hot and something oops happens, I just make another one because these guys grow fast. They're quite easy. I put them on a par with the Yaupon as far as being easy to make a Shohin bonsai out of. So the variety, I think down here, and maybe across the lake you guys have better luck with it, but this is just a green Japanese maple, and the maples can be a little touchy. They get a little dieback, they can get a little fungusy, they can, they don't really like the really, really hot weather here. So they can be a little bit difficult, but still, it's worth the difficulty to get the beautiful winter color out of them, in the fall. But the only thing, I have really good luck with my pine, and the only thing I suggest is that you find somebody that's good with pines to get you on the pine kind of treadmill. We repot them in January, we cut the candles back in June, we needle thin in November and wire, and then we do it again next year, except if it doesn't need to be repotted, then we just, kind of keep looking at it. But if you get into that timing cycle, I find black pine, people grow them in Hawaii, so they can grow down here in the heat. Some people in Florida have problems with them, but they can take a fair amount of heat and some of this humidity. I do use copper spray on mine and the 3-in-1 spray to keep the bugs, especially the fungus away. Not so much the bugs, but the fungus. They can get a little moth that'll light inside the candles, and a larva will destroy the candles. But a 3-in-1 gets both the needle cast fungus and the little moth, and so I typically use a 3-in-1 spray and then follow up in between with copper, because we get so much rainy weather that I think the needle cast is my biggest problem. But the hard part with pine as a Shohin is getting a lot of growth in. People have trouble on their big pines getting the growth in. So getting growth in on a little pine can be a little daunting, but if you stay at it, it's doable. And like I said, this is a whole lot more inexpensive tree than, say, a Japanese import that's 2 feet tall. So it just allows you to have Japanese pine without, really spending all that much money.
Yeah, you want to talk about
azaleas, and this one is a little multi-root. I'll take the little fertilizer bags off. This is an exposed root azalea. It's not had a whole lot done to it yet. It's a fairly good variety for this area, though. It's wakabisu, and it tends to take this heat and humidity that we have very well. So, but what we've got here, if I lift this up, is you can see the roots, and it's going to be an exposed root. There's probably that much root in the pot still to expose. And eventually it won't have near as much greenery on it, but right now it's just getting strong and getting to the point where I'm going to get brave enough to style the thing. But azaleas, I find azaleas a little tough down here just because if you go with varieties that do well in the ground here and in the landscape here, it tends to work out pretty well. But the Japanese varieties, the Satskis can be a little demanding. And they don't take alkaline water. They don't, they're picky about a lot of things. They do tend to be fairly buggy in the fall. They'll get those lace wing things. So they do require more upkeep, but the flowers are, all the rage. So they're a lot of fun, but I've had issues with azaleas. It's an ongoing thing with me.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, Dawn, I'm just going to take the mic and then kind of
Sure.
wrap it up for them. From you. I only have one mic, so I'm gonna make do. But
For Christmas, we knew what to get you.
yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Dawn, for putting on that presentation. I was just gonna say some closing notes here. We're gonna be doing our next Thursdays like this. Oh, I'm not even in the camera. We're gonna be doing our next Thursday a little bit taller than you. The next ones are going to be mostly live streams. I'm already talking to other guest artists to do this again. We have pretty good viewership on this so far. Thanks for everyone that's signed in and is viewing currently. If there's any questions after this stream, just email me to them, and then I'll talk with Dawn, and she can correspond with y'all to answer more questions about her Shohin trees or any other techniques that she talked about tonight. As far as the workshop that we're trying to plan out as soon as we're able to have group meetings again, everyone that has registered for this viewing and has gotten care packets and handouts will get a discount for that coming up in the future. So as soon as I know, y'all will know. So then again, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys probably next week. I'm planning on doing a little bit of styling, some live stream styling videos. I think the elm trees would be appropriate to work on right now because they're starting to lignify and harden off, so we can do a little bit of work on those, and hopefully our bald cypress trees will catch up and we can do some streaming on those, because I know that's a pretty popular subject as well. And didn't really mention it, but I think bald cypress would make decent Shohins. The leaves might be a little bit big.
I have yet to see good ones. I have a couple of small ones that I love. So I don't know as far as Shohin size, but it's worth a try.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys are into the bald cypress being in the smaller size like that, could also be a possibility, because we do have plenty of stock bald cypress that could be chopped down quite easily. So if there's any further questions, I'm going to go check the live stream chat that's running on YouTube. And if there's no questions, then I'm going to be ending it here. Just one moment. Let's see what we got. Okay. All right, guys. We all have a good night. Thank you very much.